There
I
we
got
go.
my lawnmower. I got my lawnmowers out of the pasture, and they're in the front yard eating. So
Those are your horses?
yeah,
I need some horses or some goats or something like that.
go get goats or sheep,
For
not horses.
for the same reason. Well, no, not horses. For the same reason. Mark, last time we were talking to you, and I can't remember when this was, but when we had you on the podcast, I think the first time, I
Uh
asked
huh.
you for your most. What did I say, Ian? What did I say? Scariest,
Just most adventurous.
adventurous, and you told us about that moose hunt where you had like the felons steal all your stuff, and um, so now I wanted to segue or to this topic or to this podcast. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, by the way. Deer Talk Now with Mark Kaiser is on the air. I'm Dan Schmidt. Um, what is your most interesting, or I should say, scariest tree stand story from all the years? Do you have one?
Yeah, I got one from it. Yeah, I got one.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. You're live. You're going.
Okay. Well, I was working with North American Hunting Club, who some of your members say I single-handedly brought to its end.
Thank you for bringing it. First of all, okay, we're going to talk about that because I get those emails even today. Shed the truth for everybody who's listening once and for all. How you did not personally screw over all those people. By the way, everybody, separate company. North American Hunting Club, different company from years ago. But Mark's going to tell you the story there.
So no, I was a contractor, just like I am for you, just like I am for a dozen or more other companies. I'm just a subcontractor. That's all I
You're a
do. Uh,
freelancer for them. Yes.
Freelance,
Yep.
hired gun for you. I was a hired gun for North American Hunter. Was never in the layering of the company, like the CEO, that type of situation. So I had nothing to do with it. I got fired just like everybody else on the staff, or laid off, or
Right.
however you want to say it. But so so if they have questions, they can go to my website and email me. But I was a nobody. I mean, I was a presence, but I
Right.
was a
You know,
nobody.
you're a host of the TV show, but yeah, you
Right.
were just like you are for Deer and Deer Hunting TV. You were a hired contractor.
That's all Mark Kaiser is. I do the
Well, you're
janitorial.
more than that. You're more than that. So okay, so it happened when you were hunting with them, and that place went out of business. I want to say 10 years ago at least.
Yeah, close to that, I'm
Yeah.
sure. So
Okay. So you were hunting for
they
them.
needed they needed another hunt, and so a lot of times their other hosts were busy because they were people, their main employees of the company, and so they reached out to me. Do you want to do another hunt? And it was December, and I was like, yeah, I can do one more hunt. And we ended up in western South Dakota, southwest corner of the state, and it was horrendous temperatures coming in, sub-zero, and then it turned out to be high winds. And so the first day we were hanging tree stands in minus 50 to 60 below wind chills with just screaming winds, 40, 50 mile an hour, sometimes up to 60 mile an hour. And that was dangerous. And that was back before the days where there was all these safety harnesses and rope, your safety line going up, all that stuff. It was, I mean, we still wore harnesses, I believe, but you just did it when you got up in the stand. And so you're sitting there like, oh. And then the next couple of days it continued. And we actually ended, I never did kill a deer. It was an archery hunt. We actually ended up stalking them on the ground because the tree stands were just so dangerous to sit in. Those
Wow.
old cottonwoods were just, and you wouldn't have gotten a good shot with a bow and arrow anyway, because you're just going back, rocking back and forth so much. So we got on the ground, did some stalking. As usual, came that close, but we didn't quite cut the deal. So
Do you remember
I'd
who?
have to say
Do,
that's my most dangerous.
do you remember who was your camera guy at the time?
Uh, Ernie Lanthier and I went out there. I
Yeah,
don't
it
know if
wasn't Terry
you,
Boder then,
no.
because Terry went to
Terry,
crawled up in a tree stand to begin with, much less.
I was gonna say Terry always had a good rule. I don't do tree
No.
stands. So, but I had one more other one real quick
Oh,
on my
absolutely.
first archery bear hunt, DIY. Well, I had a friend and he flew us into a lake in Manitoba, um, and a bear came up the tree. And I'm not saying and this wasn't like a yearling bear. This was a 400
Oh my
pound
gosh.
big male bruiser. And he came right up the tree and stared at me. And then he decided things weren't quite right and he went down. And how I pulled this off, I don't know, but I arrowed him.
Oh,
Got him.
really?
That's how I know how big he was. And first thing he did was he stood at the base of the tree and had a wooden ladder this guy had made, and he stood there and shook the tree, and then he started coming up, and then like I said, he looked me in the eye. We were probably a yard or two away, maybe at most, and he looked me in the eye, and then he went back down and he paused. And again, I don't know how I composed myself. This was real early on in my archery career, but I got an arrow into him, and to this day, it's the biggest black bear I've ever
Wow,
shot.
that's an awesome story. Do you think that bear came up because he knew you were in the stand?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure he sensed me down below when he was shaking. Obviously, he was like, "There's something up there," and then he come up, and then it was just one of those, I don't know if I want to deal with this right now type moments. It's I always tell people it's always is the meal, is the dominance, whatever, worth it to getting injured? And his mind just said, this probably
And
isn't
he
worth
actually
it.
picked the wrong choice because you want to bear wing him. I've seen that on other guys' hunts, but never a big one. It's always like a cub or something that
Exactly. Yeah.
just kind of maybe curious and crawls up, and then maybe a sow will come and like bluff the tree or something. But I've never heard of anybody actually shooting the bear. Then I mean that must have been a really cool hunt.
I didn't sleep for, I think it was close to, again, this is early in my career, so I was jacked up on adrenaline, but I didn't sleep close to 3 days. I mean, it was just so much of a rush that I mean, I might have dozed off here or there, but and then we were on our way home a day later, so I know I didn't sleep then as I was driving with my brothers.
Dang, that's an awesome story. Okay, well, we got plenty of good Mark stories now that we can use for the future. So how are things? Okay, we're heading into summer. How are things out by you? You live in western Wyoming. You hunt all.
North Central
I'm sorry,
Wyoming, yeah.
north central. You still hunt all over the place. What's how are things shaping up for this year?
About perfect.
Really?
I haven't drawn too many tags. I'm still waiting on a tag, and it's kind of the season is starting to even out enough where I get some breaks in between hunts, and I really like that. Like back in the North American days, I was gone the whole fall. I mean, there were times, there years, like a decade to 15 years right in there, where I was gone 50% of the time of the year,
Dang,
just
wow.
gone.
Yeah.
And I just don't. As I get older, I want to appreciate my hunts a little more. I'm sure you kind of feel that same
Yep.
way. It's like, why rush from hunt to hunt? Why not appreciate what's going on at the moment? Spend a little time learning the country, and so yeah, I've got a couple elk hunts early. I'm waiting on an antelope tag here to see if I do that in Wyoming right now. Will be the earliest of the hunts I start if I draw that tag, and then transition from elk to deer, and then deer usually into coyotes. So is
You do
the
it
way I
all,
do.
and that's something I've admired you. You've done it for such a long time, but you still have that fire. You kind of go right into my first question: is you do live in coyote country? Is that I know you got both sides of it. You do it because you enjoy it, but you also do it to help manage. Is coyote hunting out there just a never-ending battle?
Never ending. It's that species, coyotes in particular, are almost, they're like cockroaches in a way. But I mean, in my mind, they're way on a higher pedestal. You're just never going to get rid of them. They've got a built-in evolutionary mechanism that when you start really pounding them and killing them, they increase their litter size, and that's not myth. That's
No, that's
actually
fact. Yep.
documented research. Yeah, over and over again, I've read research on that. So. Uh, I have no problem shooting coyotes. I kind of think some areas might get a little over the edge on it where they do too much aerial shooting, and I think that gets a little out of hand. There's reasons for it, there's circumstances for it, but overall, I think there's enough predator hunters now with the occasional animal damage control personnel going in and handling a unique situation that We don't need to be spending thousands and tens of thousands of dollars on killing coyotes. But that said, like I said, there are circumstances where they will work into a sheep flock or a cattle flock and maybe do a little damage. So I think the biggest damage they do, though, and you would probably agree on this, is fawns.
Right.
I mean, they're just incredible predators on fawns.
And that was my question is out there, I think it's worse. I think when you get to the southeastern parts of the United States and then western parts of the United States, I think the predation on fawns from coyotes is worse. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. I mean, I've read the studies. The southeast United States right now has some of the highest fawn predation rates, and going up the eastern coast. And some of that is tied to not only have coyotes expanded and they found habitat that they can flourish in, black bears are also flourishing right now. And there's a lot of reports coming out, studies, research shows that they're big predators, which I already knew. If you read the grizzly bear studies and the black bear studies, black bears tend to prey on people when the attack is happening. There's the occasional mother and cub stuff. Grizzly bear, it's almost always a dominance or cub thing. There's a lot of recorded instances of black bears actually stalking and preying people. So they're not that they're gonna, or not that that's a huge problem, but they're great predators too. And when the fawns hit the ground, they're just like coyotes. Their diet begins to transition from whatever straight up to fawns. And a lot of the research shows 50, 60, 70, 80% of a coyote's diet goes straight to fawns.
Wow.
Right now. So
that was my next question was, so how bad is it? I mean, if it's over 2/3, which what you're saying it is, that's something that you can't take your foot off the pedal. But the other question is, how many guys are trapping out there as well as just hunting and shooting them on sight?
You hardly run into it. The last trapper I ran into was 2 years ago.
Really?
And that was a guy trapping on his own ranch. We were in Montana, deer hunting, and he was running. He told us he was out checking traps. I don't see anybody out in my country hardly. I'm sure there are.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying they're not, but there's just no price. You kill a coyote, trap a coyote, shoot a coyote, whatever. And then you spend the time, which you have to get top dollar, to stretch it, skin it, stretch it, put up the hide. And you're only going to get 20, 30. Sometimes these Western coyotes might get 40, $50.
Which is actually pretty good these days for a coyote pelt. Yeah.
Exactly. But then look at an hourly wage.
Oh, yeah.
How many hours you put into that, fuel costs. You're not getting your money back.
No. And that's why I think around here people are doing it. I just took up trapping. I got my certification or whatever this spring. I did it because I think it's fun. And I think that's where the resurgent. We just had Alan Probst on the show here a couple weeks ago. And that's the resurgent. But like you said, especially out there, what you have to understand is in these western states, I would even include like South Dakota and some of these. I know Montana's weird with their laws, and so is Colorado. But the gas alone to run a coyote line, it's not like here where I can run a line on 80 to 100 acres and actually have some pretty good success. I was going to say raccoons have the same kind of compensatory population. Like if you start hammering the raccoons, they're just going to explode, and that's what coyotes are. But yeah, I mean, you're spending hours and hours, and then to maybe get $20 or $30 for a pelt, you're not getting your money back.
Exactly. So it's good the fact that predator hunting has shot up in interest as far as people wanting to do it just for the sport and the enjoyment of being out in a different time period of the year. But predator hunters simply cannot control coyotes on a baseline level. You need trapping. Trapping is the only way to do it, and they can keep a pretty good control on them. But that said, I just experienced yesterday afternoon, we watched a doe give birth to twin fawns in our pasture, and we went out and looked at them and stuff. I always take my wife up there and get some pictures and cool stuff on them. That said, if you do kill a coyote right now or 2 weeks ago or in the next 2 weeks, it can make a difference in in that single fawn or two surviving in a small area, because you're taking, you might take the male out, you might take the female out, but you're taking part of the hunting equation out, which reduces what they're bringing back to the den for those pups. And then if you're hunting close to the den, you can easily lure in two, the male and the female, and possibly a sibling who's the babysitter there. You can knock down 2 or 3 coyotes because they're so aggressive right now, especially with young pup and distress calls. And then I use a dog. I use my dog, and this is the time of year to use a dog for coyote hunting.
Well, that's a good point you make. Like you said, you might not be able to cure the world's problems, but you could definitely improve the situation on your property that you're hunting.
And that's what I tell everybody. Look at it in a small micro world. Kill 2 or 3 coyotes on your property. Say you manage whatever you manage in Wisconsin there, and that's going to save maybe 2 or 3 fawns right there, which it doesn't take them very long to get into escape mode. By mid-July, for sure by August 1st, fawns are pretty well able to evade a coyote. So.
Yeah, it only takes a couple weeks. How does it affect mule deer? Because I know their fawning rate isn't as their average fawn is not twins normally, right? I mean, you have that singles and antelope too. I'm sure it's got to really put the hamper on them as well.
And when you look at it, whitetails and like elk, you see behind me, elk and whitetails are very adaptable species. They ranged from coast to coast, from the Arctic to the jungles, basically. Antelope and mule deer are very niche, habitat-oriented species. So you start taking one little factor like fawns dying in the spring from predation or whatever, and it doesn't take long to hurt the population because they're in a condensed habitat that any little change. And in this day and age, with mule deer especially, and antelope, you probably throw in the same category, but especially mule deer, there are so many changes in their landscape that it's hard for them to increase their population right now. They're just at a standstill or a slow
coming down. What is your crystal ball for both of those species? Do you think that we're still going to have them 50, 100, 200 years from now?
Oh, we'll have them. I just don't know if in the same numbers because of, again, all the changes that are going on in the West right now. And the big change, and I'm looking out my front window, I see it right here, is the amount of people moving here. When I looked out my front window when I first moved here, I couldn't see a house, maybe one. And now I can see, I don't know, half a dozen, all these ranches sold off and you got all these subdivisions. And that is a major threat to mule deer. Even though you see mule deer living in town and stuff, it's still hard on them. And then you add in predation, an extended drought, habitat changes, the aging habitats transitioning from sagebrush to more weedy cheatgrass environment. That's not good for them. They're up against a lot of roadblocks, a lot of obstructions that I just don't see them, again, catapulting up. Like elk populations right now are just, in a lot of areas, they're at an all-time high. They're above objectives. I mean, game managers don't even know what to do with them.
So they're doing pretty well. Yeah, they're doing pretty well. Yeah, Wyoming's giving away cow tags this year, aren't they?
That's what one of the things they came up to solve the problem. And
that's crazy. I would never think that would happen.
It's not an answer though. I can tell you that. The problem here is the same problem everywhere in the West as an elk hunter. And you see this with deer too. And you probably, I see it in Kansas, I'm sure you see it in Wisconsin, is that these private landowners are shutting down so much of the hunting. 30, 40, 50 years ago, you could knock on any door and get to go hunting. It wasn't a big deal. But now they've shut it down. And these animals understand the refuges, especially elk are migratory. Yep. Those boss cows, they figure it out. They go the same place. Mule deer, I see the same thing on public lands here in Wyoming and Montana. The minute there's hunting pressure, even if they're on the public, they're off onto a private parcel where they know there will be probably hunting pressure, but way less hunting pressure.
Okay, so that's a trophy. I mean, a very coveted species, elk, even antelope, even mule deer. Back to whitetails. what is the situation in those states for the guy who wants to travel out there? I know the answer. I want you to give it. Is for whitetail hunting, is it doable? Is it something that is sustainable, or is it getting more difficult for a non-resident to come out there and hunt whitetails?
I think it's getting more difficult, like almost every hunting situation. And again, a lot of it goes back to the outfitting, leasing a land, and or just private landowners wanting they move here from California. I hate to pick on California, but
You can.
we do. I talked to a guy the other day to come fix some fence on my property. He's from California. He'd moved here recently. So uh, you get people just shutting down land, and because of that, it's harder to get permission. Believe it or not, some of the people watching here might understand this, but maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago even, but especially 20, 30, 40 years ago, whitetails were considered vermin in the West. And I still have a neighbor down the road that says just shoot them all.
Yep.
He'll let me go. He doesn't have much land, but he's like, shoot them all. And so you used to have that, but now it's becoming, again, a moneymaker for outfitting, one. People just not wanting anything killed on their property, two. And so it is a little harder to get on for every species, including whitetails, which used to be a gimme. And pronghorn kind of had that too. They were kind of like, yeah, come on, pronghorn. We got so many.
Wow.
I'm sick of them. They're in the haystacks in the winter. Shoot them all, leave them. I don't care. I used to hear this crazy
man.
stuff. So,
I would have liked to have been there then, just because I love antelope meat. I think it's the best. For whitetails, I have experienced that many times traveling over the past 20 years for the TV show. I would be there on a tag that I could shoot either a whitetail or mule deer, and I had landowners and outfitters begging me, like, you like whitetail? I'm like, absolutely. And they're like, that was like, yeah, go ahead, shoot whatever one you want. I don't care. But if it was a mule deer, nah, it's got to be so big or whatever, or they're kind of like, and I have seen that shift. But what about like the public land guy? Is that still doable for whitetails or not so much?
it is. I mean, like the Black Hills of Wyoming, Black Hills of South Dakota, those are real. Even though South Dakota has everything, from cornfields to the Black Hills, but that Black Hills those areas have pretty good whitetail populations. The foothills of the Bighorns, where I live, have good populations, and then you go across into one. I mean, I could go on forever on these, but yes, there are areas, good areas, and sometimes, like, say you go over the mountain from where I live, you may think, well, I got to stay close to the mountains. But those whitetails, pull up your hunt stand hunting app, for instance, and you start looking at all these willow bottoms that begin crisscrossing through the sagebrush. Those whitetails are, like I said, they're adaptable. And anywhere there are willows and good cover, those whitetails tend to spread. And the other thing, say like the other side of the mountain for me is a desert, but it's irrigated. They put a lot of crops in. So you find a good stretch of willows that go through some BLM land, Bureau of Land Management, up against an irrigated hayfield. Hey, you get in the edge of that willows where it's BLM. You probably won't be able to go on the hayfield. That's probably private, but you're in a transition area where they're going to go back and forth, and you can tag a deer. Eastern Montana has lots of opportunities like that. Idaho is full of opportunities. Even the Panhandle has pretty good whitetail hunting. Again, you might have to hunt a transition area, bordering area where you're in a narrow canyon, steep narrow canyon, hay fields below, and you've got to go up on the forest above. But those deer are going to be going back and forth, especially during the rut.
How bad are the prices on those tags? If I want to just go out there whitetail hunting with a bow or a gun, is it still doable or is it getting kind of pricey?
It's really across the board. I was actually, for an article, I was researching it a couple of days ago, and it varies from, like, I think the low I saw was 268 up to almost $700-800 a tag.
Yep.
And Wyoming's pretty pricey. Say you want a hunt Wyoming and you put in for the special draw.
Yep.
And don't quote me on this, but I think that's close to $700 some bucks.
So like $1,000. I have it this year. Yeah, it's expensive. They doubled it. And I know that a lot of the residents, especially the outfitters, were really trying to fight the state, and I think they fought them for quite a long time. But that tag, it's basically what Mark's talking about. It's a tag that you can get that is, it's kind of almost a guaranteed tag, but it's you got to get it through an outfitter or maybe a landowner if you know one, and it's super expensive. If you want to just do it over the counter or your draw situation, Wyoming is different in the fact that there's all these different zones you've got to apply for. But $300 or a little bit less than that, that's not too terrible. Once you start getting that $700, $800, $1,000, then it's, especially like you said for a whitetail, then guys are like, I don't know if this is worth it. Maybe I'll just stay home, or maybe I'll hunt closer to home than trying to make that. But it is a cool hunt, and you can do it with bow or gun. And I believe, is it statewide, you can use a crossbow too, right, Mark?
In Wyoming,
yeah. In Wyoming, absolutely. You can. Other states, you'd have to check.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbows and the all-new TX440. This compact crossbow features new twin riser technology as well as a rail-less design to provide superior accuracy. Coming in at only 28 inches long and 6.5 inches wide, the TX440 packs a powerful punch in a compact, ergonomic design. For more information, visit 10pointcrossbows.com.
So let's take Wyoming out of the mix. What would be your best suggestion if somebody wants to draw a tag in one of those states? We're going to say out west. What do you think is the best draw right now today?
For success in drawing?
Success in drawing and just sheer opportunity.
I would probably rank Idaho and Montana as the two tops. First, a little easier draw, and then good chunks of public land to hunt. I mean, you have access.
I wouldn't have thought of Idaho. That's kind of a new one for me.
They kill some big whitetails there. Yeah. You start looking at the record book; they got a pretty impressive record there. And if you're looking for a big whitetail, then hands down, number one place goes Eastern Colorado. But you got to build preference there, and you're probably gonna have to go outfitted or pay a trespass fee. There's just not a lot of public land out there. There's some, but just it's a lot of it's upland bird hunting when you get to researching its areas for pheasant and stuff. But it borders western Kansas, great genetics. They cross over. Big mule deer too. Some of the biggest mule deer in the country come from western Kansas and eastern Colorado.
I believe they have hybrids there too, don't they? Whitetail mule deer mixes.
I think almost anywhere in the West where you see them within miles, there's going to be a hybrid at some point.
I've seen some cool ones over the years. Not that I have shot; other people have shot. Like it'll have a mule deer face, but a whitetail rack, and vice versa. Kind of a neat deer. If you do get a chance to hunt an area like that.
I've personally never shot one I've had tested or confirmed, but I've shot a couple that sure look like they've been crossing over.
Well, that's the thing too. That I don't know if they were confirmed, but the ones I've seen, very distinct. Like fork G2, the racks look like a mule deer rack, and then you look at the face and it's a pure whitetail rack, and vice versa. A mule deer rack with those big donkey ears, and then a nice 5x5, maybe 130, 140 inch rack. Kind of a cool trophy. On the flip side, let's ask you about. I don't know if you're going to take the bait on this one, but what is the most overrated destination for whitetails? Maybe in relation to cost versus opportunity.
As much as I love my Canadian brethren, I think Canada is overrated. I don't think it was 30, 40 years ago when it first is like introduced to the world as a deer hunting spot. But I've been up there on, I don't know, not quite, maybe 7 or 8 hunts over the years. I've never seen a monster whitetail up there, and I've only killed a couple. All right, yep. So you're in agreement.
Same here.
So I've seen way bigger whitetails in the Midwest. In my home state of South Dakota is where I killed my biggest whitetail ever, not right near my back door. Well, not too far from my back door, but so I just think Canada's a little overrated right now, and I think there's better opportunities in the lower 48.
I agree with you 100%. And this is all due respect to all my friends up there. I have many friends up there, much better deer hunters than I am, killed much bigger bucks than I have ever killed. But I know they have them. I know that it can be done, but I've been there, same thing, 5-6 times. I have never seen one, and I know I am you know me, I'm very guilty of this. Day 3, 4, 5, I shot the first buck I saw just so I could get out of there because I don't have the mental capacity to sit for 12 hours at a time and not see anything for day after day after day.
In sub-zero temperatures.
In sub-zero temperatures. Yeah. And I've done it, and I've hunted Saskatchewan where you can bait. Saw some deer, thankfully, because that kept me in the stands longer. And I was in camp where some guys shot some nice deer, but as I get older, the travel just wears me down, and the just sitting out there wears me down. Some awesome camps, some awesome places with some great people, but especially for the money now, I could think, my new favorite, and I know this is one of your favorite all-time places, my new favorite is Kansas. If you can draw a tag in Kansas, I've hunted their gun hunting. It's awesome. It is.
That's probably why I didn't draw a tag last year. You took mine.
I took your tag, and I shot one of my best deer too. Thank you. I got to thank Linda for that at Mossberg. She got the tag for me, and Ted at Tall Tine Outfitters. But people say, and I'm going to let you expand on this, Mark. Well, why can't we be more like Kansas? Actually, I'm not going to give the answer. I'm going to let you give the answer. Why can't we in Pennsylvania be more like Kansas? Why can't we in Wyoming or Minnesota or Iowa? Well, not Iowa. I shouldn't put Iowa in there. Michigan. Why can't we be more like Kansas? Why can't they be more like Kansas?
Well, it's like many things. It comes down to a bunch of reasons. It's not just one single, but genetics. One thing, Kansas has some good genetics there. It's just, you just see it. It's just, again, growing up in South Dakota, hunting a lot in Nebraska, even hunting in Iowa, and I've seen good genetics there, but you just see it the minute you sit a stand on a good property. You got to be on a good property. And number two, management. People are managing better there, or managing not only with the state because of the limited. In Kansas, you only get one buck tag as a resident. When I grew up in South Dakota, I could get 4, 5, 6 buck tags, and it's like, well, where's the management? Where's the buck management, maturity management in that? You're just shooting every 2.5-year-old that walked out of the woods. So you got management, you got DNA. There's a lot in the soil there as well. There's good soils in Kansas. And then Kansas is very liberal in their baiting, but most of these people in their baiting are doing year-round feeding. And I think that makes a big difference too on keeping that fat layer on a deer all winter long. And Kansas doesn't have a winter like North Dakota, obviously. And North Dakota can bait too. But I do think that guys who have good food plots, do some forestry work, or have a constant food source going at a feeder, I do think that benefits, because those does come into spring, they've got fat, yet on them, so they're not robbing their body when they're dropping their fawns. They're in a fairly good state of health. Bucks begin growing antlers right away. So I think the management, geography, that all plays into effect, and then people personally managing their properties at a much higher rate of maturity in bucks.
Okay, so Mark mentioned all the things that are the ingredients that go into a deer. The one thing that I always bring up that I think most people overlook, and I have the stats, I left them in my office. I was going to bring them up today. If you look at Kansas, the state of Kansas, now you might have to correct me here, Ian, on the screen, but I think is about 2.9 million people, and they've got like 68 million acres of ag. Now let's compare that just to my state, which is a good state, Wisconsin. We have 6 million people and about 14 or 15 million acres of ag. So if you look at what I always say, you cannot compare your state to a state like that, because it comes down to a numbers game. They have all the right things in the soil, the genetics, people managing it, because there's simply more land, not as many deer getting killed, and simply not as many hunters. And if you want to have a huge glaring example, you look at like a Pennsylvania or even a Michigan, and it just blows you away the number of people. Like it's just it's night and day, and it's apples and oranges. But I think that's a big one that a lot of people overlook. Okay, Mark, I want to get to a couple of things here quick. Yet, I wanted to switch completely over to because I know you're getting ready for hunting season, and you're a huge proponent. I see you wearing Wildlife Research Center, and they've been a great sponsor for us for TV. But you've been a huge guy on the scent-free hunting, whether you are on the ground going after them or hunting out of a tree stand or hunting out of a ground blind. What do you do now in summer? What are some of the steps that you take to prepare for season for whitetail hunting in regards to scent control?
Well, I'm organized, although my wife calls it anal, but I'm very organized. So this time of year, or in the next few weeks or whatever, I'll actually go out on my cement driveway, which gets washed all the time by rain. And then, well, not all the time. I live in Wyoming, so that's a little bit of a stretch. I'll lay out all my clothes there and get it organized. And I actually organize from early season, say from antelope, elk, early season deer, blah, 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 all the way to cold weather where I got the parkas and everything out. And then I wash it all. And I have different scent-free bags or totes set up. And I put those series of clothes in those totes in summer so they're ready to go in the fall. So say I come out of a pronghorn hunt here now in August, August 25th, tagged out, hopefully. And I'm going to transition the next week to elk. I don't have to be digging for a whole new series of clothes, worrying about these clothes being all dirty. Everything's ready to go in its own tote. And so I try to get everything washed up, organized by season, and it's sitting in a room in my garage, which I try to keep as scent free as possible. It's just an airtight room. No, nothing's in there except my hunting clothes and a little bit of hunting gear, because I got another room that's actually separate hunting gear. And then it's when I come home, go from one hunt to the other, I just pick up the new tote. Maybe have to wash some underwear. I'm a pretty clean guy, but you usually have to wash them.
That's a pretty neat idea. I'm kind of the same way, but not quite to that extent. I just don't have the room for a separate room, which I really like that idea. I've seen that at hunting camps where they've actually have they not only have their washer and dryer there, but they'll have an ozone room too that they use for keeping things scent free. And do you do the same thing with your footwear? Do you have separate footwear that you keep for just the hunting season?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you transition from, a lightweight hiking boot, again, during the early season, say you're doing mule deer stalking, or even hunting whitetails when it's 90 degrees out. It's hard to put those big muck boots on or whatever, lacrosse rubber boots on when it's 95 degrees, your feet just sweating. So sometimes I'll look for a scent-free type light hiking weight boot with a liner in it. But yeah, I've got a whole series of boots, footwear, same way. And then going back to the laundry, I don't have Jeff Bezos type money, so we have one washer and dryer set up. But before I wash and before I dry, I take Scent Killer Gold and I spray. I actually rinse the drum of the washer and then spray it out with that, and then use Scent Killer laundry detergent. And then I do the same thing in the drum of the dryer. I spray it down really well, and then I use Scent Killer dryer sheets in there. Sometimes I don't know if this helps, but I do like using like the autumn scent ones. I think it's a mental booster as well as helpful. But
that actually puts me in hunting mood when I use that stuff.
Yeah. So I do try to be very meticulous, and then I try to do stuff that most people overlook. My backpack, I wash. I get a big lick tub. I don't, what a lick tub is, livestock lick tub. They're just laying all around the West here, blowing around. So I pick them up when I'm driving around places, and I fill that with scent, rinse it again, put scent-free soap in that, and then I wash my backpacks in that big tub of water and then rinse them off and hang them outside to air dry. And I'll have like a say an 1800 cubic inch pack, a 3800 cubic inch pack, again, for different hunts, all cleaned, ready to go. And all I got to do is take the one pack, take my little first aid kit, whatever I got, in there, throw it into the other pack, and I'm ready to go. And like your wrist sling on your bow, try to wash that. I would try to wash all hats. I see guys grabbing hats all the time off the dashboard of their truck or in their house, their favorite cat, but they've never washed it. It's got the sweat stain. It's like that. Every little thing you take into the whitetail woods or elk woods or wherever should be at least ready to go opening day. And then throughout, you should try to maintain it for scent-free status.
Great tip on the hats. What I do, people say, how do you wash them? I put mine in the washing machine, but I set it on top of the spinny thing.
Rotator, whatever.
Where you would normally put fabric softener, liquid fabric softener. I set them on there, and then I just put it in with maybe a couple pieces of clothes, like shirts or something, and then wash it. I don't use any other laundry soap other than scent killer. That's all I use. I mean, even for my regular clothes, I just use it for that. I can't smell anyway, so it doesn't matter. I'm not going to use some kind of smelly thing, and I'm single. But no, I put the hats on there, and then when I dry them, I will try to stretch that out because they do kind of shrink a little bit. So I will put them outside and dry them there. That's a great tip. I don't think we've ever run across it. Okay, one more thing here before we let you go, Mark. I wanted to talk about, we had a lot of comments coming in even this spring about mock scrapes and how to prepare them before archery season. Do you do that? And if you do, what are some of the tactics that you use?
Absolutely. I would set up a mock scrape. I don't think you need to do it in July, but I would say late August isn't too early. You definitely should have something going in September and early October. So that's the late window, I believe, is to get a mock scrape going, is say by the second week of October. The earlier you get it going, and deer, what I've noticed is they may not be scraping crazily in the summer, but they do occasionally scrape on a field edge. I'm sure you've seen it too. It's not probably right. It's maybe just a habit, a tick or whatever, but they're doing it. But it's starting to establish a pattern to checking an area. And what I would suggest to people is when you set up a mock scrape, say you're not loaded with money again, no Jeff Bezos money, so you got to kind of budget for the deer urine and stuff. I would start September 1st, August 25th, somewhere in there, and start with a doe urine and then just alternate dominant buck, and eventually working up to like Wildlife Research Center's, I think is the best one out there, the golden estrus, eventually working up to that to like the third weekend in October. But if you start alternating it, you're setting a pattern and you're setting curiosity that they want to come, who was in there next. So for that 1 week or 2 weeks, whatever period, it's a dominant buck that's in there. And then the following week, it's just regular old, doe urine. And then, like I said, until you transition up to right before the edge of the rut where you want them to, or the pre-rut where you really want to get them when their testosterone is peaked and they're still 2 to 3 weeks from breeding, then switch to golden estrus.
Will you use leftover scent from last season?
I do, but I freeze it. If I don't freeze it, I keep it in my basement in an area down in my basement that's around 50 to 60 degrees, so it's not even at room temperature. So, but most of the time, if it's the good stuff, stuff you really spend a lot of money on, you can freeze it. And that's the stuff I use up right away. Because again, it's just curiosity. And then transition to the stuff that's dated 2024, that you picked up the day before.
I do the exact same thing. Because somebody had that question for me, and I'm like, I do the exact same thing as you, as I keep that stuff cool, but I will use that in the summer months for those scrapes for the same reason Mark's talking about is, and I think Steve has mentioned this before on the podcast, Steve Bartella. He said you want to get those deer to spend a disproportionate amount of time on your property, and if you get that, if you get them just even, and you have to have it in a travel area. You can't just stick a mock scrape. Hey, here's a great spot. Well, if the deer aren't coming in there, you're not going to have any activity. Or, my stand happens to be here. I put them on the edges of food plots because I know they're coming in there anyways. And they do work them, but you can absolutely use older scent. It's just that you don't leave it out in a garage or something where it's going to be 100 degrees in summer. Then it's going to go bad.
You don't want it to be 80, 90 degrees day after day. It'll go bad.
Yeah.
But, and I suggest this to people too, and Steven, you'll probably mention this for and other things, but say you're hunting a small property, and that's more and more common these days, maybe only 20 acres. I know some guys hunting on 10 acres, and that's postage stamp. That's down there. But you don't have room for a food plot. Maybe you can't give permission to do a food plot. Maybe there's no baiting. A lot of different things fighting you on that little piece of property. And you're wondering, how am I going to get deer there? Well, scents are one of the ways, again, just as you mentioned, if you can attract them there, or it's hopefully there's a travel route going through there. They're going through this little postage stamp over to this guy's soybean field or over to this bigger piece of timber. And then have scent stations set up as your attraction to make them pause, to make them want to bypass, to make them want to spend just a touch more time there. It's probably the only thing you might have in your playbook to use, but it can work, and it'll work more and more and better as the rut approaches.
Great tips, Mark. As always, awesome talking with you. We very much appreciate it. Do you still have your website going?
Yep, Mark Kayser, or markkaiser.com, and then they can go on there, and it's best to go on there, click on my Instagram and Facebook, and I'm on X too, but where I spend the most time is Instagram and Facebook.
The only guy who's called it X, I think. I still call it Twitter.
You still call it Twitter, yeah.
Always. I guess I'm always going to be stuck in there.
Elon Musk was over the other day, and he just told me quit calling
Oh my
Twitter.
gosh.
I said, all right, Elon.
Did he give you one of those dishes that you can
Starlink?
Yeah.
No, I need one though. Yeah. So when I go elk hunting in the middle of nowhere, I can talk to somebody besides myself.
Okay, Mark. Well, thank you so much. Good luck this summer, and good luck this upcoming fall. We appreciate having you on the podcast again.
Thank you for inviting me on as a guest. I appreciate it.
All we ask you guys to do is like and subscribe. That's it. Where you're ever listening to this podcast or watching the podcast, head over to YouTube and join the legions of deer and deer hunting fans over there. It's YouTube.com/DDH Online. For Mark Kayser, I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us for Deer Talk Now. We will catch you next Thursday for another brand new episode.